And what's up, Gamecock Nation? GC Live here, Wednesday episode of the show. I am Wes Mitchell. He is Chris Clark. We are, as always, presented by our buddy Clint Hammond of the Mortgage Network, NMLS number 71597. Clint is the branch manager of the Columbia Mortgage Network and our presenting sponsor of every single show. We appreciate Clint. ClintHammond.com is how you can get more information or just give Clint a shout, 803-771-6933. Clint will help you walk through that process of either buying a new home or if you just want to see what's out there as far as a possible refinance goes, maybe save yourself a little bit of money, then who knows? You can save some money, subscribe to Gamecock Central, donate to the Garnet Trust, all types of things you could do with all that money that you save by refinancing with Clint Hammond. Again, he is Chris Clark. I am Wes Mitchell. Welcome in. As we roll along, we start to put Missouri behind us, move ahead to Auburn. So Kendall Smith was very excited to point out, Chris, that South Carolina is playing the Tigers in Columbia 3 straight weeks in a row. I don't know if she thought of that first or if someone else came up with that, but Kendall was very excited during our Saturday show last week to point that out. So this is Tigers week 2. And certainly you don't want to end the season, Chris, losing to 3 straight Tigers. So getting 1 out of the 3, they obviously lost last week to the first round of Tigers. Getting 1 out of the 3 was going to be important, clearly, for bowl eligibility. But you don't want to lose to all the Tigers on your schedule. So we move forward. Coordinator speaking today. Yesterday got overshadowed, I would say, a pretty good bit by just the Beamer quote, the Beamer reaction to all the VT stuff. Now people have moved on. I think that's in the past. That's yesterday. Now we start to talk a little bit about these Auburn Tigers and the type team South Carolina is going to face. And coordinator speaking today, not at this point in the season, there's not really a whole lot left to add, except for saying things in different ways that you've had to say all season long. But I thought that maybe one of the biggest takeaways from today for me, Chris, was just Marcus Satterfield sort of confirming exactly what Jason Brown told us on Monday. And that was that, hey, the book is out on some tendencies. The spin move has been scouted. And now it's all about Jason Brown being able to sort of adjust to the adjustments that teams are making towards him.
And a good stat also that came out in the press conference that Jason Brown climbed the pocket 3 times, had 3 completions. 1 was a touchdown and another one went for a first down, according to Marcus Satterfield. And I didn't realize that, Wes. We did talk about on, I think it was Monday's show, we talked about how Jason Brown, his best play of that game came when he stepped up and moved to his right and threw that strike to Josh Vann, beautiful pass for the touchdown. Didn't kind of off the top of my head realize that there were a couple other step-ups and nice throws. So that was something that was kind of easy to see during the game, in that Jason Brown was retreating too much, the spin out, too deep at drops. Missouri, as you pointed out, Wes, multiple times throughout this week, rushing very, very wide. And so if you step, as you went through that game, watching it, you're kind of sitting there going, if they're climbing the pocket, if they're stepping up, there's opportunities here, especially with what Missouri was throwing at them. There were some guys getting open, and the pressure became too much. So that Satterfield said was a big point of emphasis. Jason Brown in our Garnet Trust interview earlier this week also pointed that out. I think my question to him, Wes, was, hey, when you look back at Florida and Missouri, what do you see good and bad? And what's your points of emphasis for these last 2 games? And he immediately went to the spin out. Said, I spun out too much. I went to that too much. Went to that well too much. And so Satterfield mentioned today how Jason Brown's been repping the stepping up in the pocket during this practice week. So I think that's going to be a really interesting kind of thing to watch within this game against Auburn and against Clemson. West is just how much does that improve? And schematically, are there any adjustments from other teams to that? If the same things happen against Auburn, it can obviously cause problems. And I even went to the next game and thinking about it, Wes, we know what type of stuff Clemson and Brent Venables, they're going to throw you the kitchen sink on defense. They're going to do all sorts of wild stuff. And it really has a tendency to get quarterbacks out of sorts if they're not really navigating the pocket well. So definitely a huge point of emphasis and a significant part of whether or not this offense can have success and score enough points the next couple of weeks to come away with a win or 2 wins.
Yeah, and I think that was just something that Jason Brown probably looks back and is like, man, with hindsight being what it is, there were some plays to be made there if he stepped up. Now, sometimes you're going to step up and the rush is still going to be there, but I think there's an opportunity there, and I really hope y'all can still hear me because I may have to have you talk for the most part, Chris, because they're coming through the neighborhood right now doing the thing where they like clean out with leaves. So y'all let me know if it's really bad, and we'll just let Chris talk. Hopefully the mic is mainly picking me up. But, Chris, the fact that Sat also said Jason Brown is working tirelessly in practice this week. He said he even saw him on the sideline like during breaks, just sort of taking reps, like retraining his body to step up, and that for his reaction to be, that's the thing you want for your instinct to sort of take over. The way that happens is if you rep it long enough that you're able to essentially go into that without thinking about it. So you have to do that enough, right, to where your reaction is to now step up as opposed to spin out. The positive thing, though, is that when he did that against Florida, and obviously when he did that against Missouri, good things have happened, Chris. The ability to do that is there.
Sorry, Wes, I thought you were muting yourself because of your thing there. Yeah, the ability is there. We saw the long throw to Josh Vann, the one where Jason Brown, he discussed it on Monday, he got super fired up. That was a really nice play. When you've got guys that are collapsing on you in the pocket and you can spin around and get out of trouble, that's a great attribute. But when they're rushing that wide at you and that's not the right thing to do, all you're doing then is you're taking yourself backwards. You're rushing yourself out of the play. You're giving yourself up potentially for a sack, maybe a throwaway that doesn't end up beating you. Maybe you try to chuck it in the stands and it doesn't exactly make it there. A strip sack. I mean, you can get all those different things that are not good outcomes. And, that's something Marcus Satterfield talked about today as well. So it's not to say that Jason Brown needs to eliminate that from the repertoire, which I wonder if it's going to go the opposite direction. Wes, and we're like, never to see it again. He's completely shelving it. But there's no doubt that it was he went to the well too much, during the Missouri game. And so that was kind of an interesting thing because in the Florida game, Wes, it was much more balanced from what we saw with Jason Brown. We saw climbing the pocket. We saw moving to the right. And we saw the spin out. We didn't see as deep a drops. Now, some of that had to do with the pressure, right, that was being given up in the Missouri game. But schematically, there were some different things that maybe made Jason Brown uncomfortable. And so going forward, it'll be about, cleaning up the footwork and the pocket navigation. We know he can do it. So just being able to, like you said, train your body to do it, being able to do it in those moments, it's going to be really important.
Yeah, and like you said, man, you don't want to completely take out his ability, take away what is a very natural skill set for him and what is a vital skill set based on what we've seen from this offense this year. It's needed. I think to me, you're safest on those rollouts. If you go back to, and I was about to say the Josh Vann play, Josh Vann might be the happiest guy in Columbia right now as far as some of the changes in the offense the last couple of weeks because he has been the beneficiary of 3 of the like signature plays during Brown's first 2 starts. But I'm talking about the one in the end zone, the touchdown against Florida, where the one that ended up getting the video complete, Gamecock creative media treatment thing. Well, you look at that play, Jason Brown didn't just roll out. He didn't just immediately escape the pocket. And, I like to think of football a lot of times just being about angles. And if your offensive tackles are dropping back into their pass set the way that they're supposed to, they're quite literally trying to pass set in between the defensive end and the quarterback. And if you immediately roll out, you give that defensive end an excellent angle to just go get you. And it makes the offensive tackle look bad sometimes. But, I mean, he's already trying to stop a dude that's 260 pounds, 6'5", and, fast as heck. So, to me, though, when you can roll out and it works, is like the play to Van when you step up into the pocket and then roll out. It's when you immediately get to the outside that you create those angles. If you step up and essentially, I would say it like this, when you step up and clear the defensive end, like let the defensive end come by you, then buy some time. And that's when quarterbacks have to make that decision depending on 100 other variables. Do I step up and throw? Do I step up and run? Or do I step up and then bail from the pocket, ideally to the right and not into the left where you're having to throw against your body as well. But that play to me was the perfect example of still using the natural skill set, the natural talent to create some things while also giving your teammates a chance to continue to help you by blocking and by playing within the structure of the offense. So I think there's always this like tension between coaches wanting things to be done exactly the way they're designed, players wanting to go make plays. But there is a line you can walk between staying within the structure, but also using your natural born skills. And to me, that play was kind of the example of it.
It was. Yeah, the structure is important, but when a guy is freelancing, you want him to also stay maybe in some certain confines, even when a guy is freelancing, and that play, you're exactly right, hit on all of the positive attributes. And we saw some of the negative side of what can happen, when you're using that ability that you have, it can detract from your performance if it's not used the correct way. And so this week has really been about, kind of retraining certain things that you've done for years and you've been able to do. Maybe I think a common way to say it would be things you can get away with. You've gotten away with in the past. We hear that a lot with high school prospects, and you can see things on film and things like that where you say you won't get away with that at the college level playing in the SEC. So I think that's one of the things for Jason Brown that, you go to it a little bit too much, your team scout it. It's one of those things you can't always, get away with.
Let's go out now, Chris, to our Primal Gourmet chat line. PrimalGourmetSC.com is where you can get more information about Primal Gourmet. Jamie on Facebook saying the coolest thing from the press conference was the story about the Ruth play. And we actually had another comment on here as well, Chris, asking about or commenting on the comments from Satterfield about how players were able to draw up their own plays. And, the staff is open to that they're open to guys coming to them with ideas. And I thought this was kind of cool. This was a nice little anecdote talking about Juju McDowell. Basically came to the staff and said, "Hey, coach, I got to play." And they put the play in. Apparently they did not run it this past week. And Sat said, somebody said, "Well, is the play for Juju? Like he's getting the ball?" And he said, "Actually, no, it's not set up for him." And Juju said the play is called Ruth. And Satterfield said, "Well, why did you call it Ruth?" And he said, because it's always a home run. So I thought that was cool that when your players take ownership, when your players are invested like that they're not just going through the motions. That's kind of neat. And it speaks to Juju's football knowledge a little bit, I think. It speaks to his desire to continue to gain knowledge in the game. But I would have actually loved to have been a fly on the wall, man. They said that they were repping the play, and Juju was out there coaching it up, basically telling the guys they were running the route wrong to get it right. So that would have been fun. Those are the type things that go beyond, the wins, the losses, the disappointment of the season. Those are the things to me that make football fun, that make sports fun. And I would have loved. I wish the creative media team would have been on board for some video of that of Coach Juju, because I feel like that would be a great sort of, what do you call it, like a tag along feature at a practice.
I wouldn't be surprised if that came out soon, Wes. Maybe your idea there will spark somebody over there at the creative team. That would be neat. Juju's an interesting kid, man, and that was a cool anecdote. Guy's a really good football player, so I'm not surprised that he's able to maybe see some things and bring an idea to the table. You remember in high school, he played in all phases of the game. I mean, he was a really good defensive player, really good running back, really good special teams returner. Wes, I wonder, this wasn't said, and I don't know. I wonder if Juju drew up that play against Florida where he was in the Wildcat. He seemed really fired up. After that, it could have just been he's happy he scored a touchdown. It was kind of that whole game was kind of cathartic for the players and the fans and the coaches. I wonder if he put in that play and he was fired up too because it worked.
Well, I mean, and he got the football on it. So
he got the football.
To me, I'm drawing up plays where I get the ball, but that's right. That is kind of cool that you got a running back drawing up pass plays. You wouldn't necessarily think that, right? Like, wouldn't you think most running backs are like, hey, give me the football? But he's out there calling up Spurrier pick plays or something. Pretty neat.
That was pretty neat.
But yeah, he's always been like a cool kid, man, like an interesting kid. I think we'll see. Maybe Juju is a future. We might be talking about this conversation 15 years from now, and Juju McDowell is an offensive coordinator somewhere, man. You really just never know. Did you have any other takeaways from the Satterfield portion of the press conference?
I think that was really the main thing. I think there was a lot of talk and some questions about the offensive line and how they played. There was more of that to me, Wes, than even run game stuff, and maybe I'm kind of not remembering certain parts of it right off the top of my head, but it didn't seem there was as much, run game talk. There was some ball security talk in terms of some different things that happened in the run game there. Obviously, Carolina, put the ball on the ground in the Missouri game, and there was some talk about that. But a lot of it kind of centered around offensive line, the pressure, that we saw with the offensive line. So that was the main takeaway that I think I had from Satterfield's talk today.
So Clayton White also obviously spoke today. There was a comment earlier on the Promo Gourmet chat line, Chris, about did Clayton White talk about how they're going to stop the run? And I mean, I don't know how to put this, Chris. Like they know how to stop the run, right? It's another matter of actually South Carolina going out and doing it. I will say this: I was going through Auburn's statistics and their running game. Obviously, they have an outstanding back. Everybody on here, I'd imagine, probably has a pretty good idea of who Tank Bixby is. If not just from watching him run for Auburn, watching him run last year against South Carolina. Most of you probably followed his recruitment at least to an extent and are aware of how talented he is. Very talented back. They've been solid in the running game. Now, as I'm saying this, I'm also thinking about the fact South Carolina is one of the defenses that if you look statistically, they have struggled to stop the run. And this is fresh off of Tyler Beatty having an outstanding game against South Carolina. And I remember just last week us talking about how, a lot of Beatty's big outings have been against like the lesser teams on their schedule. But then you're saying that South Carolina fall in that category. And Beatty very clearly ran the football extremely well last week. So I point this out not in any way saying this necessarily means that South Carolina is going to have a ton of success defensively in the run game. But Auburn's offense has not been near as good the last 5 weeks in the rushing department as you would think with them having a guy like Bigsby, or as good as they appear to be on the raw numbers. They're averaging, I think it was 5.16 yards per carry. Each of the last 5 weeks, they have averaged less than that. Now, some of that is, against Georgia. Against Georgia, they averaged 1 point something yards a carry. Not many people have success running the football against Georgia. Texas A&M, we saw how talented they were up front. They really held Auburn's running game in check. But even, against, I think, Ole Miss, against Mississippi State, they didn't get held in check completely, but they didn't just go off either. A lot of their numbers, as far as that goes, are being propped up by a couple of games early in the season where they averaged 9 yards a carry in a couple of games, 9+ yards a carry. So Auburn, I'm sure, is sitting there saying, this is our week to get right against South Carolina's defense. That said, there is a reason to believe that if South Carolina can play a little bit better than they did this past week, it's not like this is just an absolute juggernaut of a rushing attack that there's zero chance for South Carolina to slow them down. Is that a fair way to say it?
I think it is fair. And, as many problems as, Florida has had this year, we have a game now where we say, boy, Florida really struggled against Samford. And they did. But Florida has still rushed the ball pretty efficiently for a lot of the year, and South Carolina was able to shut them down. Now, you go to the other side, they've certainly had some struggles. So when you look at this Auburn team, I think you rightly pointed out that some of the inefficiencies that they've had the past 5 weeks have come against, good team, 4 ranked teams, right? And even Ole Miss's defense. I mean, last year they gave up 900 rushing yards a game or something, and this year they're a lot better. They're a serviceable, solid defense this year. They've really improved. Then you got Georgia, then you got A&M, Arkansas. They're certainly capable of doing a good job. Mississippi State, they kind of got in a shootout in that one. I think, Wes, a decent comp maybe, and I'm not trying to go, transitive property here on you, but when you look at like the LSU game, Auburn wins that one 24-19. LSU certainly had some issues earlier in the season, especially stopping the run. They've corrected a lot of those, it seems, statistically. But in that game, Bo Nix was the leading rusher, 12 rushes for 74 yards. Jarquez Hunter had a decent day, 6 carries, 65 yards, and Bigsby was 9 for 27, so a 3-yard carry average. And they only had 163 yards as a team, with Nix taking up most of those. So Nix is obviously not in this game. TJ Finley is going to be more of a pocket passer guy. You figure schematically, Mike Bobo and Brian Harsin, they're going to build in more, maybe more passes, more short passing, game. We might see more of that. And then certainly, they're going to work
the
on
BMW Road Home sales event is going on.
Yeah, I think, Chris, if you look at this matchup and, going back to, like you said, Florida, they struggled with Samford, but a lot of that was defensively. So, if you look at what Florida did in the running game, which is, we're talking about, and I'm bringing this up in a sense of South Carolina stopped the run against Florida actually really well. They ran the football, and you can say, well, did they have success they had on offense because the Florida defense had sort of quit, and then the Samford game may give you some ammo to support that idea. The other side, I mean, Florida scored 70 points against Samford. Like, the offense was not an issue. I had it pulled up, but everything wants to autoplay a video these days, so I had to close it before I came back on the mic. So I don't have it right in front of me anymore. But basically, they were averaging, I think one of the leading rushers was averaging like 11 yards a carry, and they were averaging, I mean, way up there. Like, every single guy had a big game rushing for Florida in that game. So the fact that to me, that may be one of the most impressive performances of the year for South Carolina, is that they were able to stop the run against Florida. A little bit of that, Chris, I believe, is in finding some momentum. Find some momentum at home. Get your crowd in the game. Get your crowd behind you. And then maybe you start to create a little bit of a doubt in your opponent. And one thing that Clayton White talked about today was that, hey, if somebody has a nice run, somebody has a positive run on you, you just got to forget about it and just move forward and on to the next play. So I do wonder how much momentum plays a factor in things like that. How much will the home crowd advantage matter? And how much will not having, Bo Nix as a rushing threat matter? Now Finley is the type kid, he can get a couple of yards on you just by getting his momentum.
Yeah.
I mean, he's listed at what, 6'7", 240 something. I don't think I remembered that he was that big, Chris. Like, I remembered he was a big old dude. And my biggest thing I remember from watching that game last year, I actually watched it at Market on Main on the big LED screen, and I just remember watching LSU hammer the running game, especially that first drive, and it was just, they went right down the field. A lot of Finley's throws were off of play action, were on 2nd and 3, 3rd and 2, where they were putting him in positive situations to throw the football. Not taking anything away from him. I did think it was also interesting, Clayton White brought it up today, whenever the word came out, whenever the news broke, hey, TJ Finley's starting this coming week. All the defensive guys were like, Coach, we faced him last year. We know about him. Probably were saying, Coach, this guy was pretty good against us last year. So there's not that little bit of letdown that no coach wants to admit happens, but maybe sometimes does, where you're like, oh, it's a backup quarterback. Nobody in that building had any thought of, oh, this is a let up, because Carolina beat Bo last year and got beat up by TJ Finley and company last year.
Did, and TJ Finley had a long run of 9 against South Carolina last year. And Wes, here's your stat of the day, Gamecock Russ stat of the day. How about that? Stat of the week. TJ Finley, only rushing touchdown of 2020 against the Gamecocks last year. So Gamecock fans have this thing where where I'm going with it, Wes. The backup quarterback is always turned into a Heisman contender after a week facing South Carolina. Now, whether that's always true, no, I don't think it's always true, but there have been some very notable examples of that. And so TJ Finley did play for Auburn earlier this year when they chose to bench Bo Nix in the Georgia State game, and did play in that one. That was his most extensive action of this year, Wes. He's only thrown 33 passes this year. Played the most against Georgia State in a come-from-behind win, 9 of 16 and a touchdown in that game. Also had a 16-yard long rush in that game. So he can move around a little. He can move a little. He's certainly going to be looking to pass the football. And so I think early downs for South Carolina West, stop the run, stop the little passes that are basically an extension of the run game. So your screens, your sweeps, things like that. Those are going to be points of emphasis. Try to get in 3rd and long. If TJ Finley, if you're in 3rd and 9 most of the day and Auburn's chucking the ball downfield and beating you, you can live with it. You don't want to live with the alternative where he's 2nd and 3 all day long. That's not what you want to see.
Yeah, well, and if that's happening, though, I mean,
Right.
If Carolina's getting in third and long and can't get off the field, different type of frustration,
Different
obviously,
type. Yeah.
if that happens. But at least you'd feel like, hey, we're getting them in these third and longs. Eventually, you're going to get the guys off the field. There's nothing more demoralizing, though, than a defense just having to sit out there and the whole death by a million cuts type offense, which is what it felt like last year against LSU. Interesting question from Brandon. He said, do we think TJ is better behind LSU's O-line 2020 or Auburn's O-line 2021? I wouldn't even venture to answer that because I don't know if I have the adequate knowledge to answer that right now. That might be a good question for our Auburn guest this week. But do you have an opinion on that, Chris?
Thinking back to LSU's line, they were pretty solid last year. And you remember one of the storylines coming out of that game, that loss for South Carolina last year, Wes, was LSU had a big offensive line. And they leaned on South Carolina a lot, and they had a lot of issues stopping the run. At LSU, I think the amount of talent they lost from the 19 team to the 20 team, which was substantial. You remember how many kids that was, Wes? They lost after that national title team. All these first rounders, all these NFL picks, a whole bunch of seniors. And they struggled a lot in 2020. The Bo Pelini experiment went horribly wrong. New offensive staff. That team didn't perform up to expectations, but they still looked pretty. They had a bunch. They had dudes. LSU had dudes. And one of the things that you hear about this year's Auburn team is their offensive line is not great, has not been great. Bo Nix, as a runner, when he was playing for them just about all this season, he can mask some things because he's going to look to move around in and out of the pocket. And so he can get you some yards, in terms of extending plays, running the football. So that is more of a question mark. I think probably going in, I may eat these words after the game if Auburn looks unbelievable, probably LSU last year in terms of offensive line edge. And they also, that LSU team, who was the receiver they had last year? It's like the one holdout. He killed Carolina as well. LSU did, the one big receiver. But I would probably have to give the edge to LSU on that front in terms of the O-line.
Yeah, and so Auburn is, and I don't know if I'm drawing a parallel here that I shouldn't, because it's not quite to the extent it was with Florida, where literally we talked about it. Their leading rusher was their quarterback, and their second leading rusher was their backup quarterback. Because I remember us talking about how that never happened. So it's probably a stretch, but there is a sense of the fact that their quarterback has bailed them out to an extent in the running game. Now Tank has rushed for over 700 yards this year, so it ain't like he's just going nowhere. That said, I pulled up, like I say, we always use PFF as a guide. 62.9 is the run blocking grade for Auburn as a team this season. So that generally, that doesn't sound like a very good run blocking offensive line. That's actually 11th in the SEC. So to give you an idea, South Carolina's line has a better run blocking grade than Auburn's right now. Now Auburn does have Tank Bigsby. Tank will make you right, as coaches like to say. But for example, Florida's, because I remember us looking at this before the game, Chris, and being like, Florida has the worst run blocking grade in the SEC. You're like, but they're one of the best rushing teams in the SEC. And I've never seen that before. I've literally never seen that before. But it's because they have a bunch of guys with high run grades as individuals, but that they're not just getting great blocking. So I'm trying to give you all a direct comparison.
And sometimes, Wes, those, the PFF grades, again, reference, we always use that disclaimer. And sometimes, it's a little difficult to tell. I recall Nick Muse, for instance, in the Florida game, after the Florida game, he didn't have a very high PFF run blocking grade. when I go back and watch the tape, it looked like he had a really good game to me because they had so many of those gap scheme runs where Nick Muse is one of the lead blockers out on the perimeter, and he's not always going and mauling somebody, but he's chipping on a guy, and then he's going and getting in somebody's way. And really, you look at that, and he's done his job. Benjamin DeRosier on the Primal Gourmet chat line. Thank you, Benjamin. Terrace Marshall was the LSU receiver. 6 catches, 88 yards, and 2 touchdowns in the LSU game last year, including a 51-yard long touchdown. So,
is he one of the few guys that got JC on a play last year? Like, didn't he, or am I thinking of something else? I feel like he may have.
The only play, and I'm sure there was more than one. There's two plays of guys getting JC I can think of. One of them, ironically, was the Auburn game last year. I'm having a hard time thinking of receivers' names this year. I'm usually so much better. That big receiver they had last year for Auburn, who was so good, he got a one-on-one ball against JC. It was a one-on-one jump ball. They threw it downfield. It was 50-50, and the guy went up and kind of took it. Obviously, JC rebounded quite nicely in that game. The only other one I can think of, Wes, was in the Ole Miss game. Elijah Moore got JC and everybody else in that game. Now, there may have been one. I want to say Terrace Marshall's long touchdown, the LSU game, might have been against Izzy, but I could be wrong on that. I could be wrong.
Yeah, you're talking about Seth Williams.
Seth Williams is the guy, Craig, and maybe some others. Yep, that was it. Good player. Yeah. That guy's a good player.
But and JC shut him down for most of that day. He got him once, but
and that was it.
Yep. JC won the day. So by PFF, LSU, by PFF, 2021 Auburn has a better pass pro O-line, but 2020 LSU has a better run blocking O-line. So take it again for what it's worth. But hey, I'll say this. When we were talking to Gabe DeArmond from Missouri, he kind of was like, man, this Missouri O-line isn't quite what they're, hyped up to be on PFF. I feel like PFF kind of nailed it as far as how it played out against South Carolina.
You were right, Wes. You came in, you were armed with stats and an opinion on the matter, and Gabe was like, no, actually not, Wes. He's like, no. But I think you ended up being right, unfortunately for the Gamecocks and for Gamecock fans. But that's the thing, man. Like, we can talk about, the PFF stats as a reference or even what we've seen this season, but the key is kind of going to be how does South Carolina play, and we've seen some good and bad. We've seen inconsistencies on this team, even within the same game. We've seen that. And so obviously affecting things in the front, affecting the offensive front, which is going to obviously affect the run game and affect the quarterback. That's going to be a huge point of emphasis in this game.
No doubt, man. We'll talk more about this game as the week wears on. Chris, I'm sure you saw the news. We don't really talk a ton of other sports, but I think worth bringing it up because the Doane Staley recruiting machine rolls along. Cardinal Newman, local girl, Ashlyn Watkins, number 12 overall prospect in the country, according to ESPN.com, which they, I guess they're the main people that do women's basketball recruiting rankings. But Ashlyn Watkins committing to South Carolina today over her other finalist, which was North Carolina. She had a kind of a top 4, but those were the main 2 schools there. And Ashlyn Watkins went to official visits to both schools. Ultimately, when you're right down the road, when Dawn Staley wants you in her program, when, she's recruiting you hard, I got to imagine that's hard to turn down. But still, another great get for Dawn Staley. And for what I understand, Chris Wellbaum does a very underrated job for us covering women's basketball recruiting. He is as dialed in with that stuff as anybody. So when I say stuff about it, it's really me just for the most part, parroting what he's reporting. And he says that the state of South Carolina actually is about to be on an uptick, starting with this class and then 23, 24. This is sort of the first year that it's back up again. Obviously, you go back, Asia Wilson, number one player in the country coming out of high school. But there was a little stretch there where you notice it seemed like Dawn Staley was going almost all out of state. And now there's going to be another sort of in-state push, I think, because you've got some really talented girls coming up. But by all indications, Ashlyn Watkins, another amazing pickup for Dawn Staley, and extremely athletic, Chris. Apparently, dunking is not even like worth bragging about when she does it. It's like one of those things where she just does it that often that it's expected.
Yeah, man. She's been dunking since, and I don't want to sell her short, but at least 2018. I mean, and so she's 6'3", 6'4", and she's been on the radar for so long. I think maybe since like her 8th grade year, kind of similar to Talasia Cooper from East Clarendon, who signed with Dawn. You know, Talasia Cooper hit the radar very early because she was playing varsity in 8th grade or something like that. So she's been one of those girls hoops players has been on the radar for so long. So that, I'll tell you what, man, that is a scary proposition for people. If the state of South Carolina is about to go on another talent run, and you got Dawn Staley, all these other schools coming in saying we want to recruit these elite players from South Carolina, but you have to get past Dawn Staley to do it.
Sorry, the gate is closed.
No
access.
Don't waste your time on that. When Asia Wilson was coming out and she had everybody after her, and there's UConn, there's a question, right? I mean, can South Carolina keep her home? Now do you have any prayer of pulling them away? And the answer right now is no, you don't.
Yeah, and to your point, do you even you got to make that business decision, right? Like, do you even waste your time at this point going head to head with Dawn Staley in state if it's somebody that she really, really wants? You might be better off just spending your time elsewhere. It's going to be interesting, Chris, to see how Dawn Staley chooses to build these teams moving forward. So much talent already on the roster. You're going to have, I'm sure, national prospects that are very interested in South Carolina from other parts of the country. And then, of course, the in-state crop as well. Believe it or not, I actually have seen Ashlyn Watkins play in person when she played against Hammond. And I've seen her play women's basketball, girls basketball against Hammond as a junior. No, I think I'm lying. I think she was a sophomore. She was a sophomore because I went and saw Boogie and Jordan Birch play. And so I watched them play before. And then some of you already know, my girlfriend is the volleyball coach, JV volleyball coach at Hammond. So Ashlyn Watkins plays volleyball for Cardinal Newman as well. And it's really just kind of, I think, for her, just something else to do. Like, she's a great athlete, obviously has great height, and she just goes out there and dominates just because she can. But my big takeaway was just, one, you're instantly like the length, the height is very impressive. And then the athleticism, the pure natural athleticism to go with it is absolutely off the charts, man. So another great ability for Dawn Staley to mold and build around and to bring into this program. And you're getting to the point where she sort of has every skill set you could hope to have within a program. She's going to have to work with. And so for those who were wondering, Wellbaum mentioned, and I've heard this name actually quite a bit as well. She's built a name for herself. Malaysia Fulwiley, 2023.
Yep.
Chris, you're familiar?
Yeah, really quick 5'6" guard from Keenan. I was going to bring her up, so I'm glad you did. She is one of the next up, certainly the biggest name next up in the state of South Carolina. Hoop Girls for ESPN do rankings for women's basketball. They have her as the number 7 player in the country for the 2023 class. So obviously she'll be a priority and certainly one to watch.
Riley Stack, who I believe is Ryan Stack's daughter, that played at Carolina, and she's at Wren, home of our buddy Jay Urich. And then 2024, you have Joyce Edwards, who's from Camden, who is supposed to be a top target as well. So again, wanted to show a little bit of love to the women's basketball program and what they're doing. And they face Clemson this evening, right?
That's right. They play Clemson, I think 7:00 tonight. Clemson, in the midst of a rebuild, I think you would say. So South Carolina certainly is heavily favored in that game. So that's another opportunity for Gamecock fans to tune in and check out the Gamecocks in a rivalry game.
Yeah, go check them out. I believe the post I saw on Gamecock Central today was titled, "How bad will the Gamecocks beat Clemson today in women's basketball?" So things are going pretty good when that's even a thought. All right, y'all, that's going to do it. Chris, you want to tell everybody before we go about Dead Soxy?
Let's tell the people about Dead Soxy. And Wes, honestly, I want to tell the people about Garnet Trust again, if that's okay to close out the show too. But check out Dead Soxy, DEADSOXY.com. Check out their full catalog. You may wonder, Chris, do they have this particular type of sock? Probably. So go check it out on deadsoxy.com. And while you're doing so, if you decide to order something, which you should, use the promo code COCKY at checkout and you'll get 25% off your order. And then, Wes, we launched Garnet Trust on Monday, had our first official Garnet Trust funded interview with Jason Brown. Lots more coming. Have a message recorded for people who have already jumped in as Garnet Trust supporters from a current football starter that I think is going to go out on Friday. Lots more coming. Really excited about Garnet Trust getting going. So if you want more information, go to GarnetTrust.com to find out how you can support, what you get as a supporter, and what it's all about.
Yeah, and real quick, I know you talked about it for a second, Chris. Why don't you tell them a little bit just what Garnet Trust literally is? Like, that's been the biggest question. Like, I know that people know about NIL, but then they're like, how do I do that?
Yeah, and that is basically at its heart, that's what you can boil it down to. How do I do NIL? If you want to come up with that question, Garnet Trust is your way. If you're a Gamecock fan, if you're a business owner and you're wondering, well, how can I leverage NIL to help, my advertising efforts by tapping into this market, this new market, Garnet Trust gives you a way to do that. If you're a fan and you want to support student athletes in terms of NIL, them being able to capitalize on it and get access to some cool exclusive experiences like virtual meet and greets, raffles for apparel, text messages that are going to get sent out with messages from players. This is how you can do it. And Garnet Trust is kind of a mechanism for NIL that's fully legal, fully compliant. It's been vetted by all the appropriate parties. And so this is a way for you to do it. So it's here. It's a new world. And Garnet Trust is here to take advantage of that. And it's a win-win for all sides that are involved.
Yeah, going over to GarnetTrust.com for more of your frequently asked questions, or if you want to get involved and donate or use the Garnet Trust to present your business to a lot of Gamecock fans via NIL, via Gamecock student athletes. That's how you do it. All right, for Chris, I'm Wes. Appreciate all of you joining in. And guess what? We got 2 more days. Then it's South Carolina versus Auburn this Saturday night, Williams-Brice Stadium. Appreciate the time. Appreciate all the support. Go like, review, subscribe, hit all the buttons. We appreciate you, and we'll see you soon.